Some inventions which have a troubled start literally go on to change the world. In the case of aerial combat, the self-guided missile is one such invention, and yet infighting within the US Navy meant that the most successful air-to-air missile in history might never have come about if it weren't for a small dedicated group of engineers working on their own and using experimental funding wherever they could find it. This is the story of the world's first heat-seeking missile, the AIM-9 Sidewinder. This video is sponsored by Magellan TV. Magellan is a new documentary streaming service run by filmmakers that have a passion for their work. They believe that knowledge is the key to human struggle, and their mission is to tell great stories that define our history to show how we got to where we are now. Magellan now has over 3,000 documentaries available, with more being added each week, with a wide selection of those being in 4K for no extra cost, and you can also stream them directly to your smartphone or tablet wherever you are. As we covered a bit of the Second World War in this video, you may well be interested in Magellan's 3-part series called World War II in the Pacific, which goes through the reasons why Japan attacked the US at Pearl Harbor and the US response as it pushed Japan back across the Pacific to the home islands and ultimate victory. A very interesting and informative series. You can watch this and many more by getting your 1-month free trial by using the link for this special offer right at the top of the description below, and I'm sure you'll love watching Magellan TV as much as I have. The year is 1946 and US Navy physicist William McLean has been working on an idea to use a lead sulfide proximity fuse that is sensitive to infrared radiation. He figured that if he could detect a heat signature of a plane, then it might be able to track the target and provide guidance for a rocket, making it into a self-guided missile. During World War II, aerial dogfights were the norm and hadn't changed much since World War I. The attacker had to get close enough to the target and get them in their sights before they could open fire. This applied to guns, cannons or rockets. Once fired, the projectiles of whatever type would just follow a ballistic path to whatever it was pointed at, and hopefully your enemy was still on that ballistic path after you'd fired it. During World War II, McLean had been working on ordnance equipment and the gyroscopic guidance system of the Bat Glide bomb. Afterwards, he moved to the Naval Ordnance Test Station, or NOTS, at Inukoin, California, now the Naval Air Weapons Station at China Lake. This was where he was investigating the infrared heat sensor and came up with the idea to use it to track a heat source and then control the steering mechanism for a rocket. But McLean didn't start out with the intention of creating a guided missile. This was more of a technology demonstrator to show what was possible, but it became much more than that, and one thing led to another, and soon the team were developing more and more subsystems to make a complete standalone weapon. Over the next year or so, his team developed new and innovative power generation, propulsion, stabilization and fire control systems all in-house. They called the project a heat homing rocket and regarded it as a complete piece of ordnance, just like a Navy artillery shell. Aim it, fire it and let it do the rest by itself. At this time, there were a couple of other competing designs for guided missiles, the Sparrow and the Falcon, which a different area of the Navy was working on, and also the Air Force was also interested. And to them, they didn't need another missile design. This is where things became a little bit awkward, with rivalry from within different areas of the Navy almost putting an end to the NOTS program before it even started. There were two bureaus within the Navy dealing with rockets and missiles. The Bureau of Aeronautics, which dealt with the design, supply and support of naval aircraft and related systems, including missiles, and the Bureau of Ordnance, BUORD, which dealt with aerial weapons, bombs, guns and rockets. BUAir mostly subbed out their work to contractors, whilst BUORD did most of their work in-house within the Navy. So what's the difference between a rocket and a missile, I hear you ask? Well, a rocket is an unguided ballistic projectile that goes where it's pointed, whereas a missile is a rocket with a guidance system that can control where it goes or track a moving object, for example. Air had contracted out their missile requirement for a guided missile called the Falcon, which was a very complex and costly system and built by outside contractors, whereas the China Lake Knots team, who were under control of Buord with their in-house designed and built heat-homing rocket. However, because Air had the official job of making missiles, they objected to Buord's heat-homing rocket, and through the Department of Defense had the project cancelled. But instead of just accepting the decision, McLean and his team decided to carry on with the project by themselves, working voluntarily in their spare time and using laboratory funding, sometimes from other projects. McLean was well liked by many in the Bureau of Ordnance, and they allowed him to carry on with his side projects, which was just as well, as by 1951 the project was advanced enough to show to the Deputy Chief of Buord, and by 1952 it was officially recognised and named as the Sidewinder, almost to spite Air because they'd attempted to kill it off. Although the Air Force said they weren't interested in the Sidewinder, some of the proponents of the programme said they should have a shoot-off against the Air Force's missile of choice, the Falcon, to decide which was better. When the fly-off occurred, the Falcon team turned up with boxes of test equipment and 8 technicians. The Knots team came with a couple of Sidewinders, 1 person, a meter and a flashlight to check the tracking. The trials against the Falcon proved decisive, as many of the Falcons failed to even fire due to technical problems, whereas the Sidewinder proved just how good it was by producing several one-shot kills on target drones. Although the Falcon was designed to be used against slower-moving bombers and was kept by the Air Force, later in the Vietnam War it proved to be just too unreliable and poor performing against fast-moving fighters, so much so that the commander of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing issued an unauthorised order to replace them with Sidewinders which they knew would work. Soon after, the rest of the Air Force followed suit. One of the keys to the success of the Sidewinder was its innovative design, which used novel concepts. One such was that it required no batteries on board, because it made its own electrical power with a tiny gas turbine driven by a hot gas generator that would burn for about 20 seconds, enough time to hit the target. This hot gas also provided the actuator power for the forward steering canards. On the Sidewinder AIM-9B, the second generation version, it used rollerons, small air-driven wheels which worked as gyros on the articulated rear canards to stabilise the missile. A brilliant piece of lateral thinking that kept the design simple, cost-effective and reliable, much more so than its limited competition. This was McLean's driving principle, to make it simple, low cost but reliable and producible. He actively encouraged competition between the various groups working on the project to come up with the best, most elegant ideas, and it worked. Although effective, the early Sidewinders were limited to firing at targets from behind, where the greatest heat source from the engines was. This meant that it couldn't be used when attacking from the front or the sides, but later versions would overcome this limitation, as well as coping with enemy countermeasures with better detectors and semi-active radar homing. In 1958, it was crunch time for the Sidewinder, when it was used for the first time by the Air Force of the Republic of China, or Taiwan, against the Soviet-supplied MiGs of Communist China over the Taiwan Straits. Even though the Communist MiGs could fly higher than the Taiwanese F-86 Sabres, and chose their time to attack, the Sidewinders allowed them to shoot down 4 MiGs in one sortie, which put a stop to the Communist advance. However, during the dogfights, one of the Sidewinders hit a MiG but failed to detonate and became stuck in the plane's fuselage. On their return to base, the Chinese handed over the missile to the Soviets, who took it back to Russia to take it apart and eventually reverse engineer it to make their own Sidewinder copy, the Vimpel K-13, which went into service with the Soviets in 1961. And so started the missile wars, with new updated versions of the Sidewinder appearing over the years up to and including the Vietnam War, with the AIM-9C, D, E, G and H versions. Over the decades since then, the Sidewinder has received 6 major updates, with the AIM-9L, M, R, X, X Block 2 and X Block 3. Due to its low cost, simplicity and effectiveness, it's become the most widely used air-to-air missile in the West, with over 110,000 of them being produced by the US and 27 other nations. It's also the most effective, shooting down an estimated 270 aircraft, more than any other missile, and stands as a testament to the original design goals set out by William McLean over 60 years ago. And it's not over yet, as Boeing have a contract to support the Sidewinder and keep it up to date until at least 2055. So I hope you liked the video, and if you did, then please subscribe, click that bell notification and share. And a big thanks to all of our patrons out there for your ongoing support.